It is July 20th, 2026, and the Strait of Hormuz is no longer contested. It is a battlefield. At 6:14 a.m. local Gulf time this morning, an Iranian anti-ship missile struck the MV Nordic Sovereign, a 330-meter, 300,000 metric ton, very large crude carrier, operating under a Singaporean flag and carrying a cargo of Saudi crude oil loaded at Ras Tanura 2 days ago. The missile hit the vessel amidships. The ship is on fire. 11 of its 22 crew members are confirmed dead by the United Kingdom Maritime Trade Operations as of this recording. The remaining 11 have been rescued by a U.S. Navy helicopter operating off the USS Baton, which was in the area, as this audience already knows, because of a previous incident involving a different ship that this channel has been tracking since the beginning of this conflict. And the United States military response, which began at 8:47 a.m. Eastern and is ongoing as these words are being recorded, is unlike anything this theater has seen since the opening night of this war. This is War Zone Analysis Reports. I have to tell you something before we go any further. I have been covering conflict for a long time, and I do not use the word devastating lightly. What the United States military did in the 3 hours between learning that 11 sailors were dead in the Strait of Hormuz, and right now, as you watch this, is the definition of devastating. We are going to go through every piece of it in order, with the sourcing and the precision this moment demands. Do not go anywhere. Before we go further, tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now, the US, Canada, the UK, or somewhere else. I want to know who I'm speaking to today. Here's the sequence of events in the compressed form that lets you hold the full picture before we go deeper into any individual part of it. Because in a situation moving this fast, the sequence is everything. At 6:14 a.m. Gulf time, 2:14 a.m. Eastern, the MV Nordic Sovereign was struck by what the U.S. Fifth Fleet, in an advisory published at 3:30 a.m. Eastern, identified as an Iranian Noor anti-ship missile. The Noor is a Chinese-origin C-802 variant produced domestically by Iran. It carries a 165 kilogram semi-armor piercing warhead and travels at approximately 0.9 Mach at sea skimming altitude, specifically designed to defeat radar acquisition until the final seconds of its approach. The missile struck the Nordic Sovereign approximately 40 meters forward of the engine room, penetrating the hull and detonating inside the cargo hold. The crude oil cargo ignited. The fire is still burning. At 4:08 a.m. Eastern, President Trump posted on Truth Social. The post contained 9 words. Iran just killed innocent sailors. They will pay today. Note the last 2 words. Not tomorrow. Not soon. Today. At 5:15 a.m. Eastern, Secretary of Defense Hegseth convened what officials described to NBC's Courtney Cube as a rapid targeting review, the compressed version of the standard targeting authorization process used when the president has directed an immediate military response. The rapid targeting review exists precisely for moments like this one, and it takes hours, not days. At 8:47 a.m. Eastern, the first American strikes began. By 10:30 a.m. Eastern, CENTCOM had confirmed strikes against targets at 5 separate locations inside Iran. 5 in 103 minutes. The last time the United States struck 5 separate Iranian locations within 2 hours was never. That has never happened before in the history of American-Iranian military confrontation. Read that sentence and understand what it means about the scale of what was authorized this morning. Now let us go to the attack itself, because the details of what Iran did and how it did, it tell you as much about Iran's current strategic condition as the U.S. response tells you about Washington's. The MV Nordic Sovereign is not a random target. That is the first thing to understand. In the Strait of Hormuz, there are at any given time dozens of vessels in transit. It was not. The IRGC Navy used a sea-skimming cruise missile fired from a fast attack craft at relatively close range, rather than a ballistic missile fired from shore or from a dispersed land-based launcher. Why? Because the land-based launcher infrastructure in the southern coastal region has been degraded by previous strikes. Because the mobile launcher platforms that remain are being conserved for a scenario the IRGC considers more critical than a tanker strike. And because the Noor, fired from a fast attack craft, leaves a less definitive radar signature trail than a ballistic launch, introducing a brief window of deniability that Iran may have calculated it needed, given the state of the Oman back channel that this channel reported on yesterday. Tankers, LNG carriers, container ships, bulk carriers. The IRGC Navy did not strike the nearest vessel. It struck a specific vessel, a 300,000 metric ton VLCC loaded with Saudi crude. The ownership structure of the Nordic Sovereign involves a Norwegian shipping company, Nordic Tankers AS, operating under Singaporean flag with a crew comprising nationals from the Philippines, India, and Ukraine. The Saudi crude aboard was purchased by a South Korean refinery and destined for the port of Ulsan. This ship, in other words, connects Norway, Singapore, Saudi Arabia, South Korea, and the Philippines in a single target. That is not a random choice. That is a message designed to be read by every nation whose commercial interests pass through the Strait of Hormuz. Iran is saying, your flag does not protect you. Your cargo's destination does not protect you. If you transit the strait, you transit at Iran's discretion. The Noor missile used in the attack deserves specific attention because the weapon selection tells you something important about the operational constraints the IRGC Navy is now working under. The Noor is not Iran's most capable anti-ship system. Iran possesses the College Fars ballistic anti-ship missile, a weapon with considerably greater range, a larger warhead, and a terminal approach velocity that makes it significantly harder to intercept than the Noor. The College Fars could have been used this morning. 11 crew members are dead. I want to say their names when they become available because they deserve to be named. They are not statistics. They are the people who make the global economy move. Merchant mariners who sail through waters that governments tell them are safe until governments cannot maintain that claim. The 11 survivors rescued by the USS Baton's helicopter crew are receiving medical care aboard the ship. The Baton's position in the northern Arabian Sea, as this audience already knows, was not coincidental. It was already there. And the fact that it was already there, positioned to respond to exactly this kind of incident, raises a question that we will return to in the strategic analysis section. Now let us go to what the United States did in response, because the response is the story that will define the next phase of this conflict, and it requires the same level of analytical rigor as the attack that triggered it. 5 locations struck in 103 minutes. Let me take them in the sequence reported by CENTCOM in the statement issued at 11:15 a.m. Eastern, attributed to General Kurilla, and read to reporters without a question and answer period, which is itself a signal about the tempo at which events are moving. The first target was the IRGC Navy's fast attack craft facility at Bandar Abbas, not a patrol area. The facility itself, the pens, the maintenance infrastructure, the fuel storage, the command building that coordinates IRGC small boat operations in the Strait. CENTCOM's statement described this strike as conducted by FA-18 Super Hornets from the Nimitz Carrier Strike Group using GBU-31 Joint Direct Attack munitions, supplemented by AGM-84 Harpoon anti-ship missiles, directed at IRGC Navy vessels moored at the facility. Multiple vessels are confirmed destroyed. The Bandar Abbas Fast Attack Facility has been the operational heart of IRGC Navy Strait operations for 2 decades. As of this morning, it is not functional. The second target was the Noor missile production and storage facility at Shiraz. This is the factory and the magazine, not the launcher that fired this morning's missile. The factory that makes the next one. The Shiraz facility, according to an assessment from the Washington Institute for Near East Policy published in February and cited this morning by their senior fellow Michael Eisenstadt on X, is responsible for producing approximately 60 to 70% of Iran's domestically manufactured anti-ship cruise missile inventory. Striking it does not end Iran's anti-ship capability. It compresses the timeline within which Iran can regenerate it. The strike on Shiraz is not retribution for this morning. It is preparation for the next time. The third, fourth, and fifth targets are where the response moves from the tactical to the strategic, and they are the strikes that are generating the most significant reaction inside Washington and among Allied capitals. The third target was a coastal radar installation at Keshem Island, the radar that gives the IRGC Navy its maritime targeting picture in the Eastern Strait. Without that radar, the IRGC Navy is operating blind in the domain that matters most to it. The fourth target was the IRGC Navy headquarters building at Bandar Abbas, not the facility from Target 1, but the command and control structure that sits above it. And the fifth target, the one that defense officials speaking to Jennifer Griffin at Fox News this morning described as the most significant of the 5, was a previously undisclosed tunnel complex in the Hormozgan province coastal hills, assessed to contain IRGC Navy Command redundancy infrastructure and, according to those same officials, possibly the planning elements for this morning's attack. Possibly. That word is in the official sourcing, and I am not going to remove it because precision matters. But a targeting decision of this scope, 5 facilities, 103 minutes, carrier aviation plus Tomahawks, plus potentially additional platforms not yet identified in the public record, does not get authorized by the Secretary of Defense on the basis of a possibility. It gets authorized on the basis of an intelligence picture that supports the conclusion. The word possibly in Jennifer Griffin's sourcing is the legally cautious formulation of an intelligence assessment that Washington is prepared to act on and has already acted on. The Nordic Sovereign attack and the American response have not happened in a vacuum. And the regional reaction in the hour since this morning tells you a great deal about where this conflict goes next. Start with the Gulf states. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Kuwait, and Bahrain have, in the past 12 hours, done something they have not done at any previous point in this conflict. All four governments issued statements within a 3-hour window between 9 a.m. and 12 p.m. Eastern, calling for an immediate cessation of attacks on civilian maritime shipping in the Gulf. That language sounds like a call for de-escalation. Read it more carefully. It is addressed to Iran, not to the United States. The Gulf states are not calling for the United States to stop striking Iranian targets. They are calling for Iran to stop attacking ships. That is a diplomatic alignment with the American position expressed through the careful language of Gulf statecraft. It is the Gulf states telling Tehran publicly that the ship attack has cost Iran its last remaining regional sympathy. China's reaction requires specific attention because China is the dimension most analysts are not adequately accounting for this morning. China imports approximately 1.7 million barrels of Iranian oil per day through back-channel arrangements that technically circumvent the sanctions regime. It also imports a very large volume of Saudi, Emirati, and Kuwaiti crude through the Strait of Hormuz. The Nordic Sovereign's cargo was South Korean bound, but the ship type, a VLCC, is identical to the vessels that carry Chinese crude imports. Beijing has issued a statement through the Foreign Ministry spokesperson calling the attack on the Nordic Sovereign deeply concerning and calling for the protection of the safety of international shipping lanes. China just publicly sided with the principle of free navigation in the Strait of Hormuz. That is not a small thing. Iran's relationship with China is the single most important economic lifeline it has maintained through years of sanctions. Beijing just told Tehran, in the careful diplomatic language of a foreign ministry statement, that attacking ships in the Strait is a line that puts that lifeline at risk. Oil markets are reacting in the way that $17 million barrels per day of exposure always reacts to a confirmed attack on a supertanker in the Strait. Brent crude is up $19.40 as of the most recent reading available at time of recording. The $19.40 move is not the catastrophic spike that a full Strait closure would produce, but it is the largest single-day oil price movement since 2020. And it is happening while the Strait is technically still open, while ships are still transiting, while no mine has been confirmed in the shipping lane. This is the oil price on a day when the Strait is merely threatened. The oil price on a day when the Strait is actually closed is a number that would reshape the global economy in ways that make this morning's 1940 look like a rounding error. I need to stop the running account right here because there is something about this morning's attack that every outlet covering it has missed completely. And it is the piece of information that changes the entire meaning of what happened. Yesterday, this channel reported on 3 converging signals: Khamenei's 72-hour disappearance, the SNSC meeting that produced no statement, and the Oman back-channel phone calls that suggested Iran was exploring whether a diplomatic off-ramp was available. I assessed that those 3 signals, taken together, described a government that was quietly testing whether the war could be ended without publicly admitting that it had been lost. I stand by that assessment. And now I'm going to tell you what this morning's Nordic Sovereign attack means in light of it. The Noor missile that hit the Nordic Sovereign this morning was fired from a fast attack craft operating out of Bandar Abbas. The decision to fire that missile was made at the operational command level of the IRGC Navy. It was not a ballistic missile fired from a fixed or mobile launcher requiring senior authorization chains. It was a fast attack craft commander executing a pre-authorized mission profile. And here is the question that this fact raises, the question that nobody in this morning's coverage is asking. Was that mission profile authorized before the SNSC meeting that produced no statement, or after? If it was authorized before, if the order to attack a tanker in the Strait was sitting in the IRGC Navy's operational queue before the SNSC deadlock, then what happened this morning is the IRGC executing a pre-existing plan that the political deliberation at the SNSC level had not formally canceled. It means the hardline operational orders were in the system, and because the SNSC could not reach consensus to change them, those orders executed by default. The mission did not require a new authorization to fire. It required only the absence of a cancellation order. And the SNSC, gridlocked between the IRGC faction and the Artesh faction, was unable to issue one. This point deserves the full attention it has not been receiving today. Because if that reading is correct, and the timeline of events supports it with uncomfortable precision, then what happened this morning was not a decision made by the Iranian government. It was a decision made by institutional inertia inside a government that has temporarily lost its ability to coordinate. The IRGC Navy fired because nobody with the authority to tell it not to fire managed to issue that instruction before the operational window closed. The Oman back channel, the SNSC deliberations, the implicit signal that Iran was exploring flexibility, all of that was happening at one level of the Iranian system, while the IRGC Navy, operating on pre-authorized orders at a different level, put a Noor missile into a Norwegian-owned, Singaporean-flagged, Saudi-laden supertanker at 6:14 in the morning. And the United States, which cannot know with certainty whether the attack was the product of a coordinated Iranian decision or of institutional breakdown, responded as if it were the former. 5 targets, 103 minutes, the full weight of carrier aviation and Tomahawk assets brought to bear on the assumption that the attack was deliberate, authorized, and strategic. That response was proportionate to a deliberate attack. It may have just delivered a devastating military blow to an adversary that was, at the moment the blow landed, in the process of deciding whether to keep fighting or find a way to stop. That is the hidden complexity of this morning. That is the thing nobody is saying. And it matters more than anything else that happened today. Let me give you the strategic picture that sits above all of this, because the tactical events of the last 12 hours, as significant as they are means to ends, and the ends are what determine whether the next chapter of this story is resolution or escalation. The United States has now struck Iranian targets on multiple occasions, across multiple categories of infrastructure, with a consistent pattern of escalating scope and ambition. The military campaign has achieved measurable degradation of Iranian conventional military capability, missile production, railway logistics, power grid capacity, bridge infrastructure, IRGC Navy fast attack facilities, and now the radar and command infrastructure that enables maritime targeting in the Strait. The cumulative effect of those strikes, taken together, represents a compression of Iranian military capacity that the Islamic Republic has not experienced at this speed or this scale since the Iran-Iraq War. That is the military reality. The political reality sits alongside it and runs in a partially different direction. Iran is not a military institution. It is a political system that controls military institutions. And political systems under military pressure do not respond only in military dimensions. The Oman back channel that this channel identified yesterday is still open. Oman's foreign ministry has not issued any statement today withdrawing from its facilitation role. The Gulf states have just publicly aligned with the American position on Strait freedom of navigation. China has issued a statement that constrains Tehran's ability to use Beijing's commercial relationship as strategic cover for Strait disruption. The Iranian government, if it still has a coherent decision-making center, and after this morning, that is a real question, is looking at a military balance that is moving against it in a diplomatic landscape that is offering it one narrowing corridor toward an exit. The question that determines everything from this point forward is whether that corridor remains passable, whether the combination of military degradation and institutional breakdown inside the Iranian command structure has progressed to the point where the actors who would need to walk through the corridor, Khamenei, the SNSC, the IRGC command, are still capable of a coordinated decision to do so. Because walking through a diplomatic corridor requires exactly the kind of coordinated top-level decision that, as of yesterday's SNSC deadlock, the Iranian system was demonstrably unable to make. The U.S. military has done what it was asked to do. The question now is whether there is a functioning government on the other side of the strait, capable of doing what the situation requires of it. Here is everything held together at this hour. 11 merchant mariners are dead in the Strait of Hormuz. The MV Nordic Sovereign is burning. The IRGC Navy's fast attack facility at Bandar Abbas has been destroyed, along with the Noor missile complex at Shiraz, the Keshem Island coastal radar, the IRGC Navy headquarters, and a tunnel complex in Hormuzgan province that may have contained the planning infrastructure for this morning's attack. Brent Crude is up 1940. China has sided publicly with freedom of navigation. The Gulf states have told Tehran publicly that it has lost their sympathy. And the Oman back channel, which this channel identified yesterday as the first signal of potential Iranian flexibility, has not been formally withdrawn, but it is operating now in the aftermath of a ship attack that the United States government has treated as a deliberate act of war. Somewhere in that space between the still open Omani channel and the still burning Nordic Sovereign is the question that will determine the next 96 hours. The question is not whether Iran wants to stop fighting. The question, the harder, more dangerous question, is whether Iran still has the command coherence to make the decision to stop. Whether Khamenei, who has now been absent from public view for 96 hours, is in a position to issue the order that the IRGC Navy will actually receive and actually obey. Whether the SNSC, which could not reach consensus yesterday, can reach consensus tomorrow. Whether the Oman Channel carries a message that arrives before the next IRGC Navy fast attack craft crew executes the next pre-authorized mission profile sitting in their operational queue. Those are not military questions. They are questions about the internal coherence of a state under maximum pressure. And they are the questions that no amount of Tomahawk missiles and carrier aviation can answer directly. The weapons have done what weapons can do. What happens next is up to the people who have to live inside the system that the weapons built. The MV Nordic Sovereign is still burning in the Strait of Hormuz. The crew manifest has not been fully released. The fire is not out. And in Muscat, Oman, a foreign minister is waiting to find out whether the phone he answered yesterday is going to ring again.